DARIA, and I prepared a new sewing tutorial for you, this time about making this dreamy blueberry puff dress. It's a fitted dress featuring a gathered upper bodice with a drawstring, long puff sleeves, and a full circle skirt finished with a ruffle in a beautiful way. I promise you'll want to twirl endlessly in the skirt. It's the perfect mix of structured and flowy, and I love how it turned out. I also made a top using this pattern, just the bodice of the dress extended by 2 cm at the waist. It's not something I usually do, but this top is actually made from a thrifted bedsheet. When I saw it, I just wanted to play around with this lavender pattern placement. I also modified this pattern into a long line top. Let me know if you want a tutorial. I love it with the added lace trim, and these sleeves are everything. Just a little idea how to embellish your own blueberry puff dress. And just a note, this is the actual neckline height of the pattern. The lilac dress was the first one I made, and I adjusted the neckline afterward. Let's go over what you'll need. For the main fabric, I'm using this cotton lawn. It's lightweight but not sheer, which makes it perfect. Fun fact, this dress was actually designed with this fabric in mind. I love the blue and pink color combination, but the print has a very obvious repeat, so I decided to add as many gathered pieces as possible to break up the pattern. Right now, I think this design looks better with plain fabrics. Also, you'll need fusible interfacing, just a small piece to reinforce the back facing and the center back edges. I actually have pre-cut interfacing tape for edges, which makes things easier. For those beautiful puff sleeves, you'll need narrow elastic. Then, of course, you'll need an invisible zipper. Now, if you want to make your sewing process more efficient, here are a couple of optional tools. A gathering foot is very handy here. It helps to create even gathers on the lower skirt. A hemming foot can give you a neat finish for the hem if you have a good one and know how to use it. But honestly, it doesn't work for me at all. And of course, the pattern itself. You can find the link to the pattern in this video description. Alright, let's get started on cutting and sewing this beauty, but first adjust the pattern if needed. The upper front piece includes different bust size options, so you can adjust the neckline height to get the coverage you prefer. The width is adjusted with a drawstring, but the neckline height is something you'll want to check before cutting your fabric. If you want a lower neckline for a smaller bust, simply cut a straight line from the notch to the center front at the bottom of the piece. If you need to raise the neckline for more coverage, there are additional pattern pieces to extend it. One adds 2 cm and the other adds 4 cm. Just tape the selected piece to the bottom of the pattern before cutting your fabric, and you're good to go. This beautifully gathered lower skirt consists of rectangles. I don't want you to print these long blank rectangles, so I created a single pattern piece to cut them all at once. There should be 3 long rectangles, each approximately the width of your fabric, and one additional and narrower piece so that the gathering is equal for all sizes. Cut this additional section piece in one on the fold in your size as it is, without cutting the paper pattern along this zigzag line yet. We need only one of this piece. I'm cutting it on the side according to my size cutting chart. So here is one of the rectangles ready. For the 3 other lower skirt pieces, cut the paper pattern along the zigzag line. Fold the fabric in half. Here I will cut other pieces, so just ignore this bottom section. So spread the paper piece until the piece measures 70 cm in width on the folded fabric. You can now draw lines, and this is the piece E accordingly. The width of these pieces can be adjusted based on your fabric width, but note that this will affect the gathering ratio. Cut 3 of these wide pieces on the fold, or alternatively, I prefer ripping the fabric if possible, as it's more efficient. This layered lawn allows me to do so without big snags on the edges. Make a small cut and rip along the width. Trim the selvages away. So we need 3 of these pieces. Don't worry about the wobbly edge, you can easily press it flat in the direction of grain line. To cut the narrow pieces like drawstrings and channels, I rip the fabric as well. I press them to be flat and then check the length accuracy with the pattern pieces. Cut all the other pieces. Mark all the notches, including those along the horizontal sleeve lines. Also make notches on all the folded front center pieces along the center fold. Let's prepare the drawstrings before the bodice assembly. Fold the edges of pieces 7 mm toward the center and press. Then fold them in half again and stitch close to the edge, about 1 or 2 mm from the fold. To finish the end from one side of each drawstring, simply tie a knot or fold it over twice and stitch. Press them well, and now they should be 7 mm wide. To sew the front, start by finishing the center front edges of the upper bodice. Fold the center front edges 5 mm or so to the wrong side, press if needed, and then fold again and stitch along the first fold edge. It will look somewhat like a rolled ham when finished. Do almost the same with the top edge, but fold it 1 cm twice. This will create the drawstring channel. Press 1 cm toward the wrong side, then fold it again and stitch along the first fold. Press one more time before stitching if needed. I use the markings on the feed dog as a guide to stitch at the even distance from the edge. This is the channel for the drawstring. It should be 1 cm wide. Thread the drawstring through these channels using a safety pin. You can do it now or later. Attach the safety pin to the unfinished end of the drawstring and insert it into the upper bodice channel opening and pull it through to the other side. Secure at the armhole edges with a quick basting stitch. Next to the side, here's a notch where we need to start gathering the piece. Set your machine to its longest stitch length and make 2 parallel gathering stitch lines 5 mm and 12 mm from the bottom edge, leaving thread tails. Make sure you have the center notch on the lower bodice. Gather the upper pieces by pulling the bobbin or needle threads until its width matches the lower bodice from the center. Make sure the gathers are evenly distributed. Pin the gathered upper bodice pieces to the lower bodice, aligning them at the center and edges. I don't overlap pieces in the center. Stitch, then remove the basting stitching. Finish the seam with an overlocker or zigzag stitch and press it towards the lower piece. These drawstrings should be tightened to fit over the bust when worn. Now let's finish the back bodice. Make sure the dart markings are there. Iron on strips of interfacing to the center back edges. This will help reinforce the fabric for the zipper. Finish the center back edges with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch, working from the right side of the fabric, and press the edges flat. Next, using the markings on the pattern, pin and sew the back darts, making sure to match the notches. Once they're stitched, press the darts towards the center back. Now let's sew the side seams. Place the bodice pieces right sides together, pin and sew along the side seams. Finish the seam allowances with an overlocker, working from the front side. Press the seams towards the back. That's it, our bodice coming along together nicely. For now, we're setting aside and moving to the skirt. First, let's prepare the upper skirt. To reinforce the zipper section, place the bodice back over the skirt and measure the zipper length. Apply 2 cm wide strips of interfacing to the section of the center back edges. Then finish both the center back and hem edges with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch and press them flat. Now pin the center back edges right sides together and stitch the seam, starting at the hem and stopping where the zipper will begin. To find this point, measure your actual zipper length and mark a notch where the seam should stop. However, I marked to sew an extra 2 cm past this notch. I explained the reason for this in my detailed zipper sewing video, which you can find on my channel. Once stitched, press the section below the notch open. Now mark a 1 cm seam allowance along the entire bottom edge of the upper skirt using a chalk or a pen. Alternatively, you can make basting stitch line with large stitches along the hem to mark this 1 cm. Next, let's assemble the lower skirt ruffle. Stitch the 3 E pieces and 1 E1 piece together at the short sides, right sides together, to form a continuous fabric circle. When stitching the last sides together, be extra careful to avoid twisting the fabric. Otherwise, you might accidentally create a mobius-like loop. To prevent this, I like to fold the long rectangle in half first and double check that everything aligns correctly before sewing. Finish the seam allowances and press them to one side. Here is a giant continuous ring we have to achieve. For a clean finish, we'll do a narrow hem along the top and bottom edges of the lower skirt. Fold each edge as narrow as possible, about 4 mm, to the wrong side twice, then stitch 1 mm from the fold. Work in short sections, keeping the fold firm with your fingers as you sew. If you have a good roll hem foot, you can use it, but honestly, mine never works for me. I've tried so many times, and even when some sections turn out okay, I struggle to keep it consistently neat. So I find it much easier and cleaner to do it manually. I have full control over the fabric this way. Now press the hemmed edges and prepare to gather the lower skirt. There are two options on how to do it. First one, set your machine stitch length to the longest and sew 2 parallel gathering lines along the top edge, one 15 mm and the other 20 mm from the edge. Leave long thread tails. Gather the lower skirt by pulling either 2 bobbin threads or 2 needle threads at the same time. But if you prefer, you can use a gathering foot. I highly recommend it. The gathering ratio for this skirt is 2:1. Always test your gathering foot on a scrap of fabric first to get the right ratio. I measure 20 cm along the scrap edge, then try to gather. If the ratio is 2:1, then I have to have 10 cm long gatherings. If not, I try several times until finding the right one by adjusting upper thread tension. For me, the longest stitch and very high tension work the best. Finally, I got the right setting. Now stitch 15 mm from the finished top edge. Try to go with the same speed. Now adjust the gathers so they are evenly distributed and fit the upper skirt width. Pin the gathered piece to the circle, overlapping the top gathered edge over 1 cm seam allowance marking on the skirt. The gathered edge and the skirt should match in length. If you made 2 gathering stitches, adjusting is easy. Just pull or release the threads to get the right fit. If you used a gathering foot, it's a bit trickier. I usually end up with a bit of excess fabric, so here's how I fix it. Cut the stitch line in one place. Gently pull out the upper thread to remove the extra gathers. Distribute the gathers evenly, being careful not to release the other end of the thread. This wave shows if the gathering is even. Make sure the ruffle fits the circle. Remove all the pins that were used to check the ruffle length, leaving only 4 to 6 pins to hold it in place. Now, to attach the ruffle to the circle, place them wrong side to right side, overlapping and aligning the top gathering stitch line of the ruffle with the marked seam allowance line on the circle. If you use the gathering foot, stitch directly in the same stitch line. If you made 2 gathering lines, sew between them very close to the upper line. Before attaching, check that no seams land on the center front and position the smallest rectangle you want somewhere at the back. So, I removed the most of the pins because this gives me better control over where I'm attaching the ruffle, allowing me to clearly see the mark seam line. If necessary, add more markings. Sew slowly, making sure the gathering stitch line stays aligned with the markings as you go. Once sewn, remove the gathering stitch lines if you made 2 of them. I'm just in love with this tiny ruffle. Now attach the skirt to the bodice, matching the center notches. Finish the waist seam with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch and press the seam allowance upward towards the bodice. Let's sew the zipper in. I have a detailed video tutorial on how I attach invisible zippers. Be sure to check it out if you need more information. Switch the machine presser foot to the invisible zipper foot. Insert the invisible zipper into the center back seam, positioning the top 1.3 cm from the bodice edge. Close the zipper and mark the waist seam. Stitch the other side, pinning to a line on the waist seam and upper edge. The center back seam should create a single line with the zipper attaching seam. Once both sides are sewn, close the zipper and press lightly. To finish, interface the back facing and finish its lower edge. Folding out the zipper tape, attach it to the bodice top edge, right sides together. Understitch along the facing side. Make sure these seams are aligned. Then press it, rolling the facing to the inside. Open the zipper and flip the facing from the top of the back over the inside of the bodice. Using a zipper foot or positioning your needle as close to the teeth as possible, stitch the facing to the zipper tape close to the teeth. Now turn the facing to the inside of the bodice. Press it neatly along the top edge and along the zipper for a clean finish. Finally, attach the facing to the bodice at the armholes, stitching 5 mm from the raw edges. Our dress is starting to look like something beautiful, so let's move on to the sleeves. On the wrong side of the sleeve, transfer horizontal lines with a pen or chalk, connecting the notches on either side. There are 3 of such lines. We have these channel pieces and we have to prepare them. Fold the edges of each channel piece 7 mm towards the center and press. Each channel piece corresponds to a specific line. A1 is the highest, A3 is the lowest. Now attach the channel pieces to the sleeves along the marked lines. Place one folded edge just above the line and stitch 1 mm from the fold. Then sew the other side of channel the same way. Repeat this process for all channels on both sleeves. I pressed the elastic slightly so it is straight and not folded. These ends are okay, they are just for the case the fabric will stretch out. I just trim them off. To gather the sleeve channels, first measure your arms in these places and cut the elastic using those measurements plus 1 cm. Pin the ends to the sleeve seam allowance. To secure the elastic, stitch each end 7 or 9 mm from the sleeve edge. Don't pull the elastic tight yet. It's better to keep these sections flat to make sewing the sleeve seam easier. Stitch the underarm seams, making sure to match the channel stitch lines. Then finish the seam allowance with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch and press the seam allowance toward the back. Finally, you can stretch the elastics fully to distribute the gathers evenly. Now finish the sleeve hem with a narrow hem, just like we did for the lower skirt. Fold the edge 4 mm to the wrong side twice, then stitch 1 mm from the fold. If you are unsure about the length, you can hem it later after trying the dress on. Press the hem. Now sew the sleeve into the armhole section of the bodice using 11 mm seam allowance, making sure to match the notches on the sleeve cap with the front and back neckline edges. Finish the seam allowance and remaining sleeve cap edge with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch working from the right side of the sleeve. So the overlocker stitching continues from the underarm to the sleeve cap. Press the overlocker finish flat. Now fold the sleeve head seam allowance 11 mm toward the wrong side and press using steam. Since this edge is curved, take your time and press in small sections. If you notice tiny pleats, don't worry, this edge will be gathered later, so they won't be visible. To create a channel for the sleeve head elastic, top stitch 8 mm away from the fold. Start and stop next to the front and back neckline edges. Give it a nice press. Using the measurements in the instructions, cut 2 pieces of elastic for the sleeve caps. Attach a safety pin to one end and insert the elastic into the sleeve head channel through the one of the openings. Leave a 1 cm tail of elastic at each end and pin them to the dress. On the back of the bodice, top stitch the sleeve head channel parallel to the neckline to secure the elastic. On the front of the bodice, top stitch the elastic parallel to the drawstring channel stitch line. You can easily adjust this elastic when you try the dress on. Just unpick the stitching at the back and pull the excess elastic to the desired fit. Here's how the corners look. Now distribute the gatherings even, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you're interested in a tutorial on modifying this pattern into a long line top. Please support this video and me with a like. Thank you.